Are not planning on coming and sitting here, can we still ask for your assistance? Because as you can hear, the acoustics in this room are kind of reverberative, which means all you folks out there who are having conversations, we can hear you really well. Really well. Apparently better than you can hear me. And as I am unable to do the typical instructor thing, which is to stand here and stare at you, Peter, I'm just going to proceed with the introduction to the chorus. I was actually going to give a longer talk about World War, Great War music, but as we are quite pressed for time and our choir needs to be done by a certain time, I'm just going to give a much briefer introduction. First, I am Zoe Dennison. I work at UFE in the psychology department. And among some of my areas, one of the things that I teach and work on is the psychology of music. And in the psychology of music, we study not just the way that music is perceived, not just brain mechanisms of music, but also the social impact of music, how music is used in people's lives and in people's cultures to achieve certain ends. And because this is also about the Great War and its legacy, I want to tell you that in my family, my grandfather was in the Great War. He tried to enlist in 1914, and he had flat feet. He was really short. He had bad teeth and varicose veins. And they said, no, we don't want to. But 2 years later, he went back, and at that point they said, okay, so we'll give you some false teeth, we'll fix your veins, we'll put up with how short you are, and off you go. So he actually did fight in the 29th Battalion, Tobin's Tigers, and was wounded quite seriously at Vimy Ridge. That was the end of the war for him, because he spent about a year and a half in a hospital recuperating in England. And of course, like many of the veterans of that time, that's where he met my grandmother, and the family story goes from there. Sometimes when we think about the music of World War I, we think about it as entertainment. Things that were done to stop people from thinking about what was going on around them, entertaining, you go to a music hall and listen, but in fact, the role of music, although it's often used or thought of as entertainment, is much deeper than that. And I wanted to share a quote with you from a fellow named Carl Polnack, who is a director of a large music school and also a musicologist. And he says, music is one of the ways we make sense of our lives. One of the ways in which we express feelings when we have no words. A way for us to understand things with our hearts when we cannot with our minds. And so if you think of the way that you use music today, that music is around you, you can see that it is much deeper than entertainment or a way to pass time. Now, the history of music and war is quite long, and I'm not going to go into it in great detail. I just want to point out that the original reasons for using music in war were actually more about communication. Because one of the things about the patterns of music is that the pattern of music is quite recognizable. And so particular bugle sounds, drum beats, those kinds of things could be used to tell people what to do. And people were trained to respond to that particular signal as what their battle should do. In fact, they were also used as a way to let the other side know that a certain group was there and that they were coming. And one of the stories of the use of bagpipes was that the Scottish troops' use of them made them so terrifying, and it was so much a part of their particular battle strategy that when the English were fighting and defeated them, they made it illegal for people to play the bagpipes because they knew it was such a rallying cry. Although people use it as communication, very soon the songs that soldiers marched to became those songs that they used for their identity. And that's a very common kind of process in music. You all have songs that you use to identify your own kind of, your preference, your genres. You'll say, oh, I love this kind of music, but I've never listened to that kind of music. And when you meet new friends, you might say, especially young folks, what kind of music do you listen to? Because it's clear that if you listen to a certain kind, we're good, and if you listen to another kind, oh, I'm not so sure that I can be seen in public with you. Yeah, isn't that true? Yes, it very much is. Well, The roots of that actually comes from using particular songs to identify particular nations. And in fact, there are stories in the history of war where nations would actually take advantage of this, clever generals, by pretending to be another group, by playing their music, and having the surprise factor. In fact, music in war is used for a lot more than that. Music in war is used as a motivator, as an emotional facilitator, and that is often when we talk about music, we talk about music as primarily a tool of manipulation. Now I know we all think that the word manipulation is not a positive word, but actually that's what we expect from good music. We don't listen to good music to feel nothing. We listen to music to feel something, to essentially choose to manipulate ourselves, to feel the power of the emotion, feel the power of the associations. Some aspects of music and its tie with emotion come from just the music itself, but most of them come from its learned associations. So if I go da-dum, 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 you guys all start looking for a shark, don't you? Yes, because that's a cultural meme that comes from music. You know what those notes mean. Because music is such a powerful manipulator, that means that not only can we use it for ourselves, but of course governments can use it, psychologists can use it, only to a good end of course, for example in musical therapy, and advertisers can use it, which is essentially a form of propaganda. Now, the emotional power is not just, of course, the only reason why music was used in the war. Some of the reasons were economic. So just before 1914 in Britain, the music hall scene, economically, there was a lot of publishing houses and people who were singing, and that was their job, and the bottom just dropped out of that market when war was declared. However, they very quickly recovered, and they recovered by turning the music hall enterprise towards the songs that were written for the war. Songs of recruitment, songs of propaganda, songs that celebrated what was going on in their homes. Another reason, of course, that music songs were popular was they were songs of endurance. And we use music to get us through the things we don't want to do. Some of the great examples of that come actually out of things like the civil rights movement in the US, where people use songs to endure, frankly, terrible, dangerous situations. And by getting together and singing a song, We Shall Overcome being a famous song out of that movement, they managed to withstand terrible things. Now, today, we recognize those songs, but we also use songs in our own life to endure things. My students, for example, tell me they use music to get through studying. I use music to get through marking. Some people use music to get through vacuuming. So it ranges all the way from music in our daily lives to music used overall in a culture. Within the war, we tend to focus on things that were relating to the culture that we're familiar with, what was happening in Britain, in Canada, in the US. But you have to remember, the other side of the war, they understood the power of music just as much as we did. And so many of the songs, at the same time, Germany was recruiting whole groups of folks that would gather together the German folk songs that were to represent the German people and German soldiers sang. That's the foundation, actually, of some later things that happened in German folk music with the next war. Now, I could talk a lot about examples. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is tell you about this choir. So this group is a choir that did not exist a month ago. Seriously, not in any shape or form. But someone, a former administrator who was here, had the great idea that we should have a chorus that would demonstrate some of the things I've just said to you in actual practice by singing the songs. She then promptly retired, leaving me holding the bag. But I recruited a really fabulous choir director, Paula Quick, from Chilliwack, and she has led this group in very short time, 4 rehearsals, 4th of which was last night, to learn some of these songs and to also present for you an opportunity with some of them to sing along. I want to tell you a little bit about our song choice. It was really hard to pick songs. There's so many songs from this era and so little time. We could have sung for hours. But we have 6, and we chose them. There was a bit of squabbling. But the first one we chose is a song called The Last Long Mile. And this is a great example of a marching song, and it's also one of the reasons we chose it. It's an example of using humor in the marching song to essentially make the song something lighthearted that could be sung as people moved along. The next song we chose is an American song, and it is a great example of the use of songs as propaganda. Because up until, as you know, partway through the war, the Americans joined. Until then, much of their song and their music were actually anti-war or pacifist. But they were getting some of the music that was being played in Britain, for example. So when they were suddenly at war, there was a great demand for propaganda songs that would not now be pacifist, but celebrate the American kind of push into the war. And so the song Over There is the first one that was written at that time, and very popular at that time. We'll do that. The third song we chose, because we also wanted to represent what we're doing right now, which is discussing the legacy of the Great War. And one of the legacies of the Great War are the stories that come out of the war, stories like the ones we've been telling today. But there are also stories that everyone tells and has heard of, and one of those stories is the Christmas in the Trenches story, where on Christmas Eve, the two sides stopped fighting to actually come together and recognize each other's humanity, and one of the ways they did that was with music. So we've chosen a contemporary song that was written in the 90s to show that that story still exists. The legacy of that story is still powerful, and that song is called Yellow Wood. And then we wanted to move into more of the songs you're familiar with, so we'll be singing It's a Long Way to Tipperary, and you hopefully will be singing along. There was also a hymn that was sung widely by soldiers in the trenches. It's sung these days even at remembrance ceremonies. It was sung in very famous circumstances, Abide With Me, and we're going to sing that just as, it's called a vocalese, with just the melody. And then we'll conclude with everyone's favorite conclusion, Pack Up Your Troubles in your old kit bag, which you may also want to sing along with. I'll point out too that we chose specifically to keep the original lyrics for these songs, because what we want is to produce the songs as they were sung at that time. And that means there's some very challenging lyrics in some of them. There's a lot of ethnic stereotypes and ethnic names that are used, as you're probably aware, at that time. So, you know, Germans are called Huns and Fritzes and other terms. There's a lot of ethnic stereotypes about the Irish, and they're referred to as paddies, and make fun of that stereotype. And there are some phrases, like for example in the last song, there's a line that everything is good as long as you have a Lucifer to light your fag. Now in modern times, nothing about that sentence would be said. Because of course, the reference to the devil is just a reference to a match. We're not talking about any kind of slurs to anyone, and we're certainly not suggesting that people should forget their troubles by taking up smoking. So forgive us, but we wanted to give you the authentic experience. And so with that, I'm going to conclude and bring in the choir, and Paula will take over.
Hurry right away, don't delay, go today. Tipperary, and I'm sure that many of you know the chorus or refrain, so please don't refrain from joining us in that.
a vocalese, and we're going to be doing 2 verses of it. And once again, if you would like to hum along, you're more than welcome.